Okay. So what am I going to cover today in this particular pre-assessment session is, these are core topics. Okay, I've divided these topics into 8 particular small series of sessions that I want to have in 6 weeks or six days. So basically 3 weeks of time frame. So basically, what I would start with is not jumping onto the topic, but at least giving you basics of where does it start from. So when I say a business model, I want to make you understand how does an entrepreneur think? How would that entrepreneur talk about in terms of dividing his capital, cash capital, inflow, outflow, and all of it? And then what kind of expenses would you see in terms of your capex, opex? What can you, how do you read a P&L statement? And from there, how do you take a bifurcation into your overall salaries, wages, and all of it? So that's what I've picked up at in terms of building that particular acumen for you in terms of when you see salary or when you talk about wages, at least you have an idea of where are these numbers getting drawn from? Or if someone says that, okay, I'm not okay to pay this much of a salary, why not? And all of it is what I've tried to, pick up here in terms of a step zero here. So we'll also talk a little about how a compensation philosophy is translated from your overall business segment in terms of your capex, opex, some basic things around it. And then how do you build on your compensation policy? So that's basically as your first zero-edge step. In terms of how your structure is getting built, so build a kind of what kind of structure do you have? So is it a role-based? Is it a function-based? Those kind of things is what we see here. In terms of job evaluation, grading, banding, uh, basis the structure that we have come up with. We then get little deep dive in terms of bringing up all our unique roles. Try to understand, okay, why this renew unique roles, or no, what is the purpose of getting into unique roles. Do a little about job evaluation techniques. So it could be from point factor, classification, or those things. What we saw as an example, if you want to run that entire process for yourself. Once your evaluation is done, you talk a little about costing of a role. So this is where you start getting into number game. How are your salary ranges being discussed, or how are your salary ranges being defined at a first level is what kind of see here. Then get into remuneration, which is your first cost of a role, and then your rest of the things in terms of what CTC do you want to give it to someone, all of it is where we actually start off. So this is your base, your very, very fundamental step in terms of saying that, okay, if I have to offer a certain cost, or if I have to pay for a particular role, what kind of cost should I, include, or what kind of costing should it have basis the role that's expected for that person to play. Then we get into designing of a little family structuring and all of it. Third step would be more about playing with the internal benchmarking. So you take a dummy data of about 50 size of headcount, and then you work on it, you start to weave a story around it. So you have some random titles, you get into org designing, you get into putting the entire job role definition, evaluations, family level structuring and all of it. And then you start with weaving of it in terms of how your org level medians could be done, how your percentiles are coming up, how your comp ratios are getting done and all of it. And then you come up and say, okay, how your internal deviations are. So that's what we do in a third step. We also look at certain scenarios for your third step in terms of if someone is moving from a different one role to another, one stream to another, one function to another function. If it's a role realignment, if it's a promotion, if it's a level up banding, or if it's a retention case. So we see all these scenarios also for a particular data set that we have. Fourth step is we go external completely, and we work on whatever that we have built until now for internal. We try and put that as one worksheet. And then as an external, what we do is we try and get data from outside sources. So basically, when I say outside sources, we're talking about free job sites that we have, or free reports that we get, or free surveys that we generally get. So all these are basically your sources that you try and get your data set. I've also taken example of portals in terms of how do you do an point-to-point comparison for getting those kind of data sets. So that's what we do at the last step. So overall, with this 5 steps that you see here, what you see is you have an understanding about little about business. You get into designing of how your salaries, wages, cost looks like. From there, you get into designing of your org structure, the first org structure. And then you get into designing of your overall roles, plans, grades, levels, and all of it. And then how you map your internal equity and with your external equity. So this is kind of a framework that I'm showing you here. That this is what you have, like 20 hours together put in for this particular workshop. And there are assignments built. So when I say assignments, it's also more of like I have built certain exercises as and when that particular session would get over. So if you do, fair enough. Uh, these are basically practice sessions for sure. But if you're doing something for your own company, you can also try doing the similar exercise with me. Okay. That's a little about how framework would look like. Okay. I've split that into a very detailed content level. So when I say first session, how it's going to look like. So basically we talk a little about business model. Where are you starting from? What kind of business model do you have and all of it? You get into little understanding of your capex, opex components. How do you translate your operational expense? When I say operational expense, these are your day-to-day running expense. Salary, wages are a part of your opex. So how do you translate them from your P&L statement? From your opex that you have, or if you want to build on basically what kind of cost do you have for your expenses related to salary, to then translate that into your compensation philosophy. So when I say compensation philosophy, at an org level, there are certain thresholds that you want to build in or that you want to put across and say that, okay, this is where I'm going to, put my money into, or these are certain kind of components that I would want to build my philosophy on. I mean, why are you doing this? Because this is going to be like your working model henceforth when you're working on your sheets. Okay. Now, all of these are on a working sheet. So when I say a P&L statement, I am going to take an example, a running example of a company, get you understand how do you read a P&L statement, how do you take care of looking at a capex, opex components, and then from there, how do you design on your overall compensation policy? So compensation policy is nothing but it comes out of your overall uh, understanding or a bifurcation of what your threshold numbers would look like if you have to segregate your compensation from salaries, wages, benefits point of view. Okay, so that's what we do in a first session. So this is basically, you should wear a hat of an employer, okay, who's gonna start his own business, and how overall inflow, outflow for cash would look like, and then how it's getting divided into your salaries and wages, because that's our concentration point. Okay. So that's what we do in the first session. Second session is more about understanding how your total rewards framework would look like. Okay, your overall. So right from your guaranteed cash to your overall compensation or to your overall benefits that you want to give, and then overall peripherals of that particular framework. So that's what we do in terms of your total rewards framework. I give a little understanding about a basic difference between your compensation, benefit, rewards, and incentives. So types, basically what can be covered when you talk about these 4 components, what you should think of. Okay. Then we get into understanding of why this need of compensation benefit, because that's where you're getting into the core of overall subject topic. Once you define on a need, or basically when you discuss on your need analysis, what kind of elements would be required for your benchmarking. So that's where you're actually now getting into the skin of this particular topic. Now, when I say elements, these elements are more for your overall, when you have to do a benchmarking for a particular job role, or when you have a vertical with you, aligned with you, how do you want to bring up those elements together so your benchmarking is done in a right way? So these are elements that we generally talk about. Overall compensation benchmarking framework. So where does it start from and how does it end? So that's what we look from a framework point of view. So this is how it would proceed for your part two. So you talk a little about your overall framework. What does it include in terms of total rewards framework? You give an understanding about every component related to monetary or non-monetary, which is a part of your total rewards framework. Why are you doing this exercise? So basically, you get into need analysis, understanding of your needs. Where is it coming from? Business stakeholders, market impact. So all of those becomes your need analysis. And then you actually get into working of your benchmarking frame. That's what we generally do in this part, in this second session. Okay. As a part of third session, what are we trying to do here is we are first trying to build a structure. Okay. Why do I want to build a structure? It's because for an employee who is part of my organization, I want to know in which line of business does he belong to, in what vertical does he belong to, what is his core roles, responsibilities from technical, functional competency point of view. So that's where I'm trying to build an org structure for you. Okay. So we see how can you build that structure, be it based on a role, be it based on a function. Okay, be it based on a line of business or a vertical based structure. So basically, these are kinds of structures that you can bring up for the first time, or if you want to revamp, or if you're looking at the first, or if you're doing it for the first time, then what kind of structure should apply to you is what you see. So basically, I've picked up examples here in terms of how an IT structure would look like, how a non-IT structure would look like. If it's a combination of a IT and a product organization, how a structure would look like. If it's a manufacturing setup, how your structure would look like. So basically, some examples around it, which will give you a headway if you want to rework on your overall structures and all of it. Structure variance, different. So basically, IT, if I talk of a pure established IT organization, what kind of structure will it follow? If it's a combination of IT product, what kind of structure will it follow? If it's a combination of services based, how the structure would be. If it's non-IT, what kind of domain are you working on? No. So your structures are different depending on what kind of overall uh, organization domain you are into, is what I've tried to put in here. Creating a structure from random. So basically, what I mean here is bring up some titles, okay? And from there, how do you start creating your structure? It's like understanding based on the roles or based on the titles that you have, okay? And then based on it is how you start working on creating a structure. So this is where I do this exercise as part of my CNB assignments so that, there are no biases for the client company that I work with. So basically just telling them that, okay, based on the titles or the roles that they have given me, this is how an org structure could look like. Now, they could have a different structure, perfectly fine. It's just a way of representing and saying that, okay, based on the research from various uh, projects or various uh, kind of clients that I've worked with, this is how a generic structure could look like. Now, they could adopt, or they could basically say that, okay, we would just want to have a glimpse of it in terms of how does it look like and all. Now, why is this also important to create a structure? Because it gives you a lot of insights about what roles could probably fall into that particular structure. So now today, when you are a strength of say just 100 people organization, probably there are certain roles that you don't have today in your organization. So what this structure would generally give you is a kind of overall job roles which are there as a part of that overall line of business, or a vertical that your organization falls into. If you have, fair enough. If not, probably you can just take an example out of it. So that's what I try to create a structure from a random thought here. Levels of hierarchy in a structure. So you have your apex organization, you have a line of business, you have a function, you have department, you have sub-department, and then you have your roles. So that's the hierarchy, what I'm talking about in a structure. I've still not gone at a role specific. This is what I'm just talking about, how you create your org structure. Based on your org structure, how do you walk forward in terms of placing your employees into that particular structure, aligning with what roles that they are playing so far. Okay. Okay. Questions, queries until now? Are you guys okay with me? You can unmute yourself if you have questions, please.
I think we're good, Miss Singh. We're going good so far.
Sure. Okay. And all of these, what I spoke until part 3, these are all happening on worksheet. My presentations are very, very small. It's like about 4, 5 slides, that's all. And then I play on my worksheet. So when I talk of a random structure, what I try and show on a worksheet is I pick up some odd random titles, and from there building on an org structure and then getting things forward. So that's my way of uh, at least making this topic seeing in front of you, so that if you have to work on this topic, you at least understand, because presentation is only for basic understanding of how that topic would move, but it's more like a hands-on. And this typical subject is, until you don't get your hands dirty on this topic, you would actually not get to understand what the crux of this topic is. So just ensure that, when you start working on this topic, you do a lot of permutations, combinations around this topic, and try and see things for yourself. Okay. Okay, as a part 4, what do I do here? This is more about, this is now we're actually getting into skin of this particular topic. Okay. So now that you have designed your org structure based on role, function, or from vertical or line of business point of view, is where now you are bringing up certain unique roles for your organization. So from the random titles that you have, at least you would understand that how your hierarchy is being based. Okay. So if I'm talking from an IT point of view, you would basically start with your trainee and end up at a VP or a director level. If I'm talking from manufacturing point of view, talking from an engineer, and then you get into your production head. So those basically those kind of hierarchy or unique roles is what I'm trying to talk here. Okay, so we design and we define them. So when I say designing, what I mean is we are actually doing a designing of these roles, coming up with a kind of hierarchy for you to understand how will this roles upscale, okay, which are generic roles. So basically, if you're looking at an engineering side, or if you're looking from a R&D side, if you're looking from enabling function side, so these are basically roles at a very uh, standard level, or basically they are more of unique roles, and then you get into naming, you get into giving them a naming convention. So if it's an if it starts from a trainee until your VP, probably you could have a VP of engineering and you could have a VP of information technology. So that's how your designing and defining of the roles would look like. Then you get into designing of job role definition. So for every role, okay, unique role that you have, there is a definition attached to it. Now, once your role definition is done, so what would your role definition look like? It would tell you that for a role that you would want to have as a unique role, what are certain prerequisites? What's years of experience, competencies, and all of it as a part of that definition. Once you're done with your role definition, how your architecture would look like. So overall job architecture in terms of how your role is being defined or at what level you want to place it and all of it. So that's a kind of a mapping or a grading structure is what you're trying to bring in here. So if you have seen, or if you have, at least seen through a kind of a structure which is more into Mercer or what, Aon uses as an overall grade banding structure, that's the job architecture framework, what they normally put in. From there, it gets into designing of your grades, band, and level structure. So now this is a structure where you actually try and put your unique roles into it. Okay. Once this is done, now you know that your unique roles have certain grades, band, levels. Okay. And if you have certain roles that you want to put into, you can get into designing of those structures out here. Once you decide on your structure, on your overall architecture, you are now mapping your titles to this particular framework. If you do this exercise, be it for your titles that you have or be it for your vertical specific roles that you have. So both ways is what you can try and do here. Once you're done with mapping of these particular job roles, you get into evaluating that particular role that you have. So when I say evaluation of role, I'm talking purely from a cost point of view. So now we are playing with numbers here. For a particular role that you want to hire, what is the salary range? Now, of course, market is going to throw you certain catalyst ranges, but of course, if you have to decide for your company, there are ways to do it. So you bring up components like your cost of living allowance, or you bring up components like your market correction, or if it's a niche role, you bring in a premium added to it and all of it. So basically, it's a kind of a overall exercise that you do to understand that, okay, if I have to bring up a cost of a role, how will it look like? Okay, so you work on the previous year job role median, and then you start working on that particular exercise is how you bring up your costing of that particular role. Okay, so this is going to be a little number game, okay, where you pick up data or a hypothetical data from last year, or if you don't have that, basically then we try and create that entire data on a worksheet and add certain components to it to say that, okay, these are my first level ranges that I want to go ahead with, and then adding certain components into it, like your market correction or your niche role premiums and all of it. You get that as a cost of that particular role, and you bring up your first salary range, okay, in this particular session out here. Now, once this is done, your next point would be you have a cost of that particular role. Now you're getting into doing your internal benchmark. Okay. So now to get into internal benchmarking, what basic components would you need? So you would need your compensation philosophy, which you have converted into your policy, where there are certain points which you have written in terms of your org level median or certain percentiles or comp ratio ranges, zone positioning and all of it. So basically that's the part of your policy that you decide and say, okay, these are parameters I will take care when I am looking at computing a compensation for a role specific who's coming to my organization. That's what you do as part of your policy statement. Okay? Now, once you have defined, once you have decided on it, you then get into designing of certain components which you would need. When I say median or midpoint, what you're trying to do here is you're actually working on a median or your midpoint salary for every role that you have. Now, this could be based on your org level median that you have decided already for a specific role or for your niche roles, or you could also work on a certain median points available, or what you have decided as part of your policy. Percentiles and quartiles, basically this would at least tell you at what particular percentile do you want to place your people. So if at an org level you would want to have, say, P50 as your midpoint that you want to have at least for all your roles, and for niche roles that you want to hire between P75 to P90. That's the kind of a catalyst that you could always derive from this particular benchmarking, saying that, okay, if I have people coming into these particular roles, this is how I would want to place it. Because this will also help your TA team to at least ensure that how they would want to hire. Comp ratio range is basically how do you want to place, or what particular range do you want to follow, and say that, okay, if I have someone falling in the range good enough, they are basically below market, above market, on market kind of a positioning that you can get with this comp ratio. Or if you have people on either of these boundaries, people who are like below your comp ratio range that you have decided or above a range, they would actually fall into your red circle or a green circle. So these are again your compensation matrix, which again, it would be more of an example based, which I'll pick it up when we are doing this exercise. So you design on that. Now, once you have decided or discussed on your comp ratio percentiles and all of it, you see how your salary grid is getting uh, matured. So basically, when I say salary grid, it's like a 5x5 matrix or a 3x3 matrix that you want to bring up. And it's like a relationship between your comp ratio range and your performance evaluators. So we bring that like a tactical way of putting a grid together. And then we talk about how your grid would look like. So why should you pay a 15% increment to a three rater who's in a range of 60 to 80 percentile? So that's the kind of matrix what when this particular matrix would throw you certain numbers in terms of deciding that why you should pay to the particular employee if he's placed on those comp ratio range, because this will also help you to at least say, or when you are getting your people aligned while your merit increments, at least position them well. So that's what we do in terms of designing of a salary grid matrix. And then lastly, it's more about certain internal benchmarking scenarios that you see, how uh, people are moving within roles, or if there are increments within uh, any kind of stream change, or if there is an internal job positioning, how do you do that particular kind of increments and all of it. So basically, there are about 6, 7 scenarios that I've picked up here, which are relevant or which are in day-to-day working for you. So someone moving from one stream to another, one role to another, one function to another, or if someone has is an attrition case, or if someone is a retention case. So those scenarios basically is what I have tried to pick up here. So basically, how would you move forward is in terms of you bring up your medians, you make up your percentiles, you bring up your comp ratio salary grid together, and then based on it, you come up with your internal liquidity deviation. So you're comparing, you're positioning a pay, not a person, but you are positioning a pay. Okay. And your pay parity worksheet would position all your employees together. That's how your worksheet would look like until now. So right from the first session in terms of designing of an org structure, get into understanding of some random titles, bring up in terms of your mapping, grading, band structure. From there, you understand how your medians are getting formulated, your percentile, your comp ratio range are getting computed. And then how do you place those particular salary budgeting exercise on a salary grid? And then for a particular person, if you have to work on a pay parity or any kind of internal benchmarking scenario, how would you look at a deviation? So this is where we're only talking about internal benchmark. We have not gone external until now. But this data is helpful for me so that when I go external and if I want to compare a 50th percentile a data coming from a job site or from a free pay site, I know that, okay, where does that particular role stand for me today? Okay, so then that becomes like a point-to-point comparison for me. So that's what we do in terms of internal benchmarking until here. Now, in part, next step, what we do is now we are actually trying to build up certain matrix. So until now, what we saw is we have uh, put all that data together. Now, at times you need certain compensation matrix to at least give some kind of analytics if anyone is asking. So, say if I have to look at a different building a new salary range altogether, how do I do that? There are certain ways where you just have your min and max point, or just have a 50th percentile, or just have a midpoint range for your particular salary or an average salary. How do you bring up those salary ranges for computing is what I've tried to show here as part of the matrix and all of it. Designing a compensation structure. So this is more about if I want to define a particular compensation structure with benefits, with variable and all of it, how how would I design it? What kind of percentage should I have? So this is what I've tried to build here from a structure point of view. Bonus incentive is more about if you need to include uh, any kind of deferred bonus, or if you need to include any kind of long-term incentive as part of your overall compensation structure, what kind of clauses you should have, or what kind of at least basic guidelines you should have around it. While the overall formulating component is a part of a compensation structure, but there has to be certain guidelines on how to pay them, basically from a governance point of view. So that's what I've tried to build here a little. And a kind of an example for a sales organization when they talk about incentives structures overall. So when you build certain matrix, okay, what you try and show is certain analytics coming out of it. From those analytics, how your compensation structure can be decided, or how you're working on your overall compensation structure. And if you have any kind of additional uh, bonuses or incentives that you would want to add as a part of structure, overall structure, to take care of your overall compensation CTC, which is like cost to company. So basically, how do you write those clauses into it so that the payout governance and overall, working of that particular component is made understood to the person who's going to have that particular component into their structure. And if there are sales executives, or if there is any kind of incentive that you want to draw as a commissioning based, or any kind of incentive which is a long-term incentive, how do you play with that particular structure? Now, this incentive structure is different from your compensation structure. So don't mix both of them. It's more of like, if you're on a commissioning basis, or if you are working in a kind of a role which has an additional compensation as a benefit given to you, okay, then this particular structure can be helpful. Now, this could also be helpful if you're a long-term employee. This is more from a retention also. So that's where I've tried to build a little structure out here. Yeah. Questions, queries?
This is clear, Nursery. Nothing from my.
And all this gonna happen over a worksheets, right, Ms. Sain?
Yes,
Because you make us do that, right? Yeah,
yes, yes.
because that's really important, for us to attribute the knowledge, to our organization.
Mm-hmm.
Because I presume that, I want to kind of probably tomorrow, and once we finish this session, I want to get myself calibrated to an extent where I go design these things for myself. So that's the
Yes.
amount of knowledge I would want to, probably take away from this particular session.
Yes.
As long as that is promised, yes, it's very exciting, because this is what I was actually looking for, because this is the business problem that I have to solve now. I believe, yeah, I'm landing on the right person.
Sure.
Thanks. It's going good. Yeah.
Sure. My intention of uh, putting this entire um, workshop into a worksheet is because when I played this, when I have been into a role of a journalist, and when I don't get, I did not get my answers, I struggled with them. And then when I got into this role, I understood how things are being built, or what are the data sets that I would need to build on all these things, is where I said that until you don't put it on a working sheet, you're not going to get any sense out of it. So whatever examples that I said until now, or whatever that I showed until now, is what I have either done, or either what I have, put them over a worksheet for someone to understand that how are these figures coming through. So even if I'm talking about, say, a median or a percentile, it's like, how is my data set being worked, and then how do I work on the data set to bring up a median for you, or from that data set, how do I work on a percentile and all of it, and then once all of those things are done, how do I work on bringing a salary grid. So that's that I mean, all of these are worksheet based. It's not going to be presentation based for sure. So even if I bring up a small presentation with a basic understanding about this topic and all of it before we get into worksheet, it's more about understanding that particular topic. That's all. Otherwise, it's the behind on for sure.
Agree. So one more question is like, yeah, all that we're gonna do is, something, which is in compliance with the current statutory laws, right? Which is in compliance with, the current market standards, isn't it? That's
Yes.
another matching, what we need to look at, because anything that I'm designing, for the current group of, the engineers or the employees, it has to be
Mhm.
acceptable by them, isn't it? Because it's not something very traditional, what we must have done maybe 10 years back, because I again, hold around 15 years of experience. I don't want to kind of design something which I might have designed for a person probably who started their career back in 2015 or 2010. So
Mhm.
whatever we're trying to design is something, which needs to be acceptable, and to be in acceptance, for every person that is starting up their careers now, and which in line has to be accordance with the current or the previous statutory laws.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I talk of a compensation structure, okay, so it would basically talk about what's there in the industry today, what major industries are doing today, and what, of
Correct.
course, either if I've consulted or if I have spoken to my clients about it, is how I bring up that particular structure. So what's acceptable today is what I would try and show you. Now, depending on how your overall organization is, or how do you work with your CFO, of course, there could be changes around it. But overall, uh, from the compliance point of view, you would not find difficulty in understanding a structure.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks, Mr.
sure. Okay. Okay, now this is where we now get into external benchmarking. So until now, we were just with internal data set of about 50 odd employees, and we're playing with that data set. We understood a little bit of matrix around it, and then how structures could look like, different structures could look like. So that's what was there until now, but only for internal uh, employees until now. Now, my need is to go external. Now, why am I getting into this need? Probably because of attrition, probably because of uh, market uh, parity, probably because of market condition today, or if I have to get into a new project altogether, just to understand look and feel in terms of how overall compensation is outside. So basically, a lot of different ways to understand what's my need today, why am I going outside, okay, to at least understand that what other companies or what my competitors are basically paying, or why am I losing to in terms of attrition data. So that's basically talk a little about need analysis. Now elements are connected here. So when I say external benchmarking elements, generally what I will need here to start my exercises, unique roles, which I've already done as an exercise as part of my internal benchmarking. I would need role definition. I would need basic understanding about years of experience. Okay. And I would need my competitors' data, so which will come from my need analysis. So basically, these are my basic elements that I will need before I go outside in terms of doing this exercise. Now, there are techniques, okay, to do it. So I just can't uh, go out, pick up an average salary, which is available to me on Google. No, I can't do that because I have my data, internal data in a different format today. I have my data, which is my fixed compensation, uh, plus my retirement plus benefit equals to a cost to company. Okay. I will have to ensure that I segregate all of them and then I work on a fixed compensation. So a thumb rule for benchmarking exercises, you never work on CTC, you always work on fixed compensation. Now, reasons behind is this, you go on any free pay sites or you pick up any report, they would always talk about fixed compensation. Now, fixed compensation, basically for most of the IT companies or most of Indian companies would have your guaranteed cash, which will be your basic salary, your HRA or your special allowances and all of it. So basically, these are your basic fixed compensation that you have as a part of your guaranteed cash. That's a thumb rule when you go for your benchmarking exercise, that you work on your fixed compensation and minus your other components from your cost to company, and then you start working on your now techniques. When you go external is how you read that data set. So basically, if I have to look from a free pay site, how do I get my data set from a job role point of view equated to at least 85% of the job role which matches to what I am playing today in my company, is how you do a data equation. Now, what does it mean? It means that there is a job definition that you have already done as a part of your evaluation. You go outside, you look at a job definition. If it matches to 85%, it means that that data set can be picked up. Now, of course, there are free pay sites who give you average data, okay? Who give you data set in terms of, or they give you data set in terms of certain percentiles. Basically, these are certain data sets that you have, but they are not in line, or they are not, or they do not equate to the data set that you have today. Basically, you bring them into a kind of a point-to-point comparison. You bring these data sets from outside. There are certain compensation metrics that you use to say that, okay, now these data sets that I've got from outside equates, or they are like point-to-point comparison to what I have today. And then you start working on that, basically churning that data set. So it could be you get data set from your free pay sites, or you get data set from free reports, or you get your data set from any kind of salary surveys which are available. So there are multiple ways that you get. Similarly, you can get your data set from free portals, all of it, plus your recruitment reports, or your recruitment dashboard that you have in terms of where are you gaining people from. So basically, there are different data sets that you can use to compare what you are giving today as a part of your compensation to your to that particular role, vis-a-vis what is it that you can see as a catalyst for that particular role from outside. Okay, these are so some techniques is what we would see here from various sources. uh, how do you collaborate that external data with internal? So I've taken an example of a vendor report. So say if I am a vendor, so when I say vendor, it means you are doing this entire exercise with a particular vendor or a particular consultant, and how they would do that entire exchange of a data set with you. in terms of, how would they ask you for your overall job roles, or, how would they do entire mapping reading exercise with you and all of it, is what I've tried to do like a case study here. So I've picked up a kind of data set available from one of the vendor where I worked with them for a particular, to take care of the entire compensation benchmarking for about 1,500 odd employees. So I've picked up that as one of the example to show that, okay, how an external data set can be mapped and internal. Now this would also go hand in hand with the internal benchmarking exercise that we have done. So I'll bring up these two exercises in front of you. Okay. One from a vendor and one what we have done already as an overall part of exercise. How do you calibrate that data? And then how do you look at certain deviations if you have to present that particular data? So how do you read a vendor report? How do you translate a data? So now there are so many free reports which are available today, right? But how do you read them? How do you know, get the right kind of information from that particular data set? How do you translate that particular data set if you have to use that data on your internal uh, benchmarking, or, how do you put that data set to show that, okay, how is external market for those roles, looks like? So that's what I've put together in terms of how do you read a report, how do you translate that data into your internal benchmarking sheet. If you're working with a vendor, what kind of data exchange will you have for that particular client and a vendor? And if you have to do it yourself, how do you do it with certain techniques so that if you are presenting that data is a right data? You cannot present an average salary from market, compare it with a 50th percentile. You cannot do that. It has to be from a point-to-point comparison. So this is what we see in this particular session out here. So you bring up your internal data set, how your overall compensation matrix would help you to bring that data from a point-to-point comparison, external sources from where you can churn your data and you can get them see as a catalyst, and your complete external benchmarking exercise with deviation. So with this particular part, from where we started from those random titles, org designing, job architecture, internal equity, and now you've finished your sheet with an external benchmarking. So now this sheet could be also used like a pay parity sheet. So when I say pay parity sheet, your pay parity sheet, mostly when you talk from a merit increment point of view, would have your merit pay as one of the column, your market correction, gender pay differential, uh, promotion alignment. So basically, these are certain components that you will see on your merit increment sheet. So what I that's what I mean when I say your exercise is over. So you get all of those points on a working pay parity sheet, so that if you have to work on a merit increment sheet, or if you have to work for any of the scenarios, you can use that sheet for yourself. Okay. So that's what we do in this particular session. And last session would be more about a kind of a dummy employee data set. There are assignments. So I do assignment hand holding from end to end in terms of from your first until the fourth or fifth session. A live project, if you're doing something with with your own organization for a particular line of business or a vertical, I can help you doing that particular project. Okay. Any doubts that you have if you're bringing that or working on that particular topic? We do a little bit of assessment on the assignment. Okay. And lastly, a participation certificate. So this is where we then end our sixth session. So in all 6 sessions, 4 pure concept. One would be working on this entire assignment or any kind of doubts that you have. And one would be on the entire compensation matrix and structures and all of it. So that's where it would be like your 6 sessions going. This is how your overall roadmap would look like. So you get into designing of your org structure, you dissect into your family's line of business and all of it, you do your evaluation process, you get that entire structure in place with your description and grading stream and all of it. You plot them using your job role techniques. You get into designing of your percentile data, your medians and all of it. Understand how your grids are coming up. Okay. Take care of your deviations out here. Take care of how you want to show your deviations from internal, external point of view, and propose if you have to benchmark for any particular role or for particular vertical specific, and that's how your pay parity sheet or salary sheet would look like. Okay. Now these are 12 basic steps. Now behind every step, there's an exercise that you do. You get certain data to life. You put that data on a working sheet, and that's how your sheet would progress. Okay. So that's how your 12 steps would look like. And these are certain exercises that we will do. So basically, when I say exercises, these are your working sheets. So when I'm talking of step 1, how your org structure is coming up, how your overall employee data size is looking like. You do an evaluation exercise overall to get the first salary range and all of it. And from there, how do you come up with your role definitions and all of it? So basically, these are exercises that you would do while you're picking the first step, or while you're working on your benchmarking, or when you're working on your evaluation exercise, or if you're working on your external data set. Until you don't do this exercise, it's a half work done. Okay. Now, uh, while all of you are working, of course, you would know, for a particular employee, you have your line of business, you have your family, you have your function, all of it. But again, until you don't put that data together, or if someone has, already done that homework, is how you're getting an extract of that data from your ATS or from your HRS, right? But so that's what we do here. So until you don't do these exercises, the data is incomplete. That's a half job done. So you take every step, you build on your exercises, and you bring that data to life and work on that working sheet. This is how you complete all your exercises and everything. Questions, queries? I'm done here with the content part. So questions, queries, guys.
So we said we'll get the complete handouts, right, of all this workshop. Basically, the complete recordings of the sessions, the way that we bring this. Do we
Yes.
get that?
Yes.
Because if tomorrow, if I want to kind of recall the knowledge, if you want to kind of reconnect to your trainings, I should be able to have an access to these trainings.
Yes.
As
So
long as I get it, yeah, it's absolutely fine.
sure. So basically, what I generally do is, I create a Google Drive. I put the recordings out there so that if you want to go through recording, you can. And whatever working sheet that I work on that particular day is also what I put for you, so that if you want to work on that similar exercise, you have something with you to at least see, go through, and work on that exercise. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, that should be a big help.
Oh yes, I mean you would need that,
Is
definitely.
absolutely, yeah, because yeah, today I do it, and tomorrow if I want to kind of redo it, because my major motto is to have it done for my organization, because I see that there is a need for me to adapt to the best practice of the industry. So that's the reason I'm subscribing to this. So the templates and this recordings will be a big help for me.
Yes,
And maybe yes, if I'm unable to kind of drive through, I will definitely consult you back.
sure.
I will extend your spaces, but yes, I think this knowledge should help me out for me to establish that personal then.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward. Yeah, to
Sure.
the
So
training
for
to this track. Yeah.
Sure. So for the template or for the working sheet, I have put certain working sheet uh, uh, which are generic in nature. So basically, what you may have to do is, if the industry is different, you may want to, you know, tweak a little with the job roles that you have. So basically, then I could help you do that if your industry is different. But I've picked up a very generic example to understand. But of course, during the session, if you want to understand about your specific industry, you can do that.
Sure, sure, sure. So we will have this session on the weekends and for the next 3 consecutive weeks, right?
Yes.
And the timings are 11:30 to 12 in the mornings, Saturday and Sunday.
11:30 to 2. So
I'm
basically
sorry,
these
yeah, it's
sessions,
2.
yeah, because these sessions are at least 2.5, 3 hours. So you need to have that patience with.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sure. And as many questions as you ask is gonna help you, because I would try and give a lot of examples from different domains, different industries, but it depends. I mean, if you have a specific question, or I would also say that if you have a specific ask, okay, that you would want to see a certain scenario in this particular exercise, let me know. I can build that, because probably I would have worked on it, or I would have, I can create that for you. So I've done that in the past as well, where if someone wants to see a structure coming from pure manufacturing side, or if they want to see certain job roles coming from pure startup side, okay, basis of course their domain or their industry, I've tried to show that as an example, so that they could visualize of how those roles would look like, or titles would look
I understand.
like.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking, probably for migration, from the one type of industry, or within IT again. I'm again talking about IT. So one model of an organization to a different model of organization. Basically, whatever we use, probably I use is a structure that comes from a captive organization, but I'm trying to kind of migrate that to a consulting model. So that's where I will probably force you to learn from you. We'll see it. Definitely, I would need a lot of your words and then help in terms of understanding how to migrate it and align myself to a consulting organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Devish, anything from you?
Not as of now, but I have sent you a direct message in case if you can see that.
Sure.
Um,
Okay. Okay, if we don't have any questions, I can wind up the session and I'll connect with you guys one-on-one. Okay,
Fine.
sure.
Yes, Mr. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll
Bye.
talk to you. Sure. Yeah. Bye,
Sure.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.